We've all heard that failures are the stepping stones to success. But are all failures created equally? Does it depend on the individual how they deal with the failures? Do men and women deal with failures differently? Hello everyone, welcome to If I Had Not Failed with me, Mannsi Agrawal, a show where I demystify all the struggles and the stories of the setbacks and the failures of some of your favorite, most successful people. My guest today is somebody that I personally have looked up to for a very long time. In fact, her actions have inspired an entire generation of women to do well. She was an anchor and editor at Nepal television. She also founded the Sancharika Samuha. She also founded Sathi, an NGO which seeks to promote gender rights because she is a strategic activist, somebody who takes great passion in working for the voice of women that have been subjected to pressures from society. More than anything else today, she's a proud representative from our country at the UN CEDAW. She is the very epitome of elegance, empathy and eloquence. She is none other than Miss Bandana Rana. Namaste, ma'am.
Thank you, Mannsi. It's such a pleasure to be talking to you.
Thank you, ma'am. So, ma'am, before we begin, I want to tell you this show is about normalizing failures. And on that note, I want to ask you, what do you consider your biggest failure and why?
You know, I was thinking of the title of this program, and I was thinking perhaps I've been fortunate that I haven't really faced major professional failures as such. But then also I thought, you know, a failure that makes you humble is much, much more important than success that makes you arrogant, right? And then I went back to childhood and I was trying to think. And I realized, you know, I actually got married very early and I was a mother at 18, you know. So here I was, a young child, not actually prepared to deliver a baby, you know, let alone knowing the, you know, the different phases that you have to go through pregnancy. My husband is the only son. And from the day I was pregnant, my entire family members, particularly I remember my father-in-law saying, my daughter-in-law is not going to let me down. She's going to get a son, you know, and I felt so proud. Perhaps I'm going to carry that lineage forward, you know. And every family member's relatives we met as my pregnancy progressed, they would look at me and say, oh, you look so beautiful. You are definitely going to get a son. And here was my young mind, you know, I didn't know about science and all that. I hadn't even studied at that time. So I really believed them. You know, here are people who are so experienced, so they can look at my face and say that I'm going to get a son, or the shape of my stomach and, you know, like. So here I was all prepared to get a son, you know, but I got a daughter. Right. So when I got a daughter, because in my young mind, it was so embedded that I will be getting a son, that it was a great disappointment for me. And particularly, I felt I had failed my family. You know, more than I mean, I don't consider that a failure now, but at that point, it did feel like a failure to me, that I had failed my family by getting a daughter, you know. So that was my first experience of quite serious, grave failure from my side. That's what I thought. But of course, as my child grew older, I realized the love that emanated, you know, the warmth of a mother and the bonding of a child and the mother. And I was worried. Why did they all tell me? Why didn't they ever tell me that perhaps you'll get a daughter? You know, and maybe I would have been happy as well if they had told me in that way. But little did I realize that no one tells you that you will get a daughter, you know, your firstborn especially, because the culture was such that people don't rejoice at the birth of a girl. So with my bonding developing with my daughter, I actually felt very interested to understand the value of a girl child. You know, the more she grew older and the more I was attached to my daughter. So I think to some extent, that experience that I went through perhaps has made me an activist of girls' and women's rights today that I am. But again, to continue this story, 3.5 years later, I was pregnant again. And this time I was well prepared. So the first failure had taught me, and I had already understood the value of a girl child. I was just prepared to have a healthy child, no matter what, you know. So all red, all prepared, So my second child was also a daughter, but I really rejoiced. I was so happy that I had two daughters, So I think, like I said, I have two daughters. I feel I'm a very proud mother, and I feel so privileged to have two daughters. Giving birth to them to some extent has helped me in my entire profession and career as an advocate for gender equality and women's rights.
So will it be safe to say that if you wouldn't have failed at that point in giving birth to a male heir of the family, or if you wouldn't have felt disappointed with the gender of your baby at that point, you wouldn't have been where you are today? Maybe you wouldn't have taken up this issue so seriously. Is that safe to say that?
Perhaps, but because perhaps I wouldn't say that if I had a son, I would of course feel equally attached to the child, as a mother, of course. And perhaps, but looking back, I feel that if I had two sons instead of two daughters, perhaps I wouldn't have felt that value of a girl child, the concern that girls are not being treated equally, the mindset that people have about girls. Perhaps I wouldn't have felt so deeply about the issue of a girl child and the issues of women's rights and the issues of equality if I had two sons. Perhaps if I had a son and a daughter, maybe, it would have given me the test about how do I bring them equally up, But I'm much more better off having two daughters than two sons, let me tell you, concerning with my career and my passion for gender equality.
For me, what you're telling me is really like an eye-opener, because before you, I've interviewed two other people, both men, and I realized that their way of looking at failure, or whatever they consider to be failure, is very different from yours. Do you think then that men and women look at failure differently, or maybe they feel that they failed if women have not succeeded so much professionally, or not lived up to their own expectations or society's expectations personally, rather than men who probably look at it in a more professional way?
No, very interesting, but I think most men are brought up in such a way that they are more geared towards professional, how much of income, what kind of a businessman you're going to be, what kind of a leader you are going to be. Are you going to be a political leader? Look at our Dasai, our festival Dasai, when we got blessings when we were young, the blessings that I got would be Saubhagyavati bhai, Ramro Shriman paye, like you get, hope you'll get a good husband, and you'll always be, you want to die before your husband, or I don't know what, Saubhagyavati and all that, Whereas my brothers, Thulo neta bhai, like des hake. So that is the way the men are brought up. So that is why I think their sensitivity, their compassion towards other issues are much, much less than a mother who feels for her child, I think that's the way that they have been brought up. The mindset, the patriarchal culture, the values, I think it is embedded so deeply that the most important thing that occurred to men about professional failures.
So tell me this, we spoke about your professional disappointment, let's not call it failure, but disappointment, and how you learned and how that in a lot of ways paved the way for what you were going to do later. But have you felt anything on a professional term, something where you think you could have done something better or differently professionally?
Well, I started my career from Nepal television, right from its inception stage. That was when television was established, 1986. And many people warned me because I had led quite a sheltered life, like a girls' school, girls' college, all that. But you are entering into a field which is a very public field, particularly television, and you are going to be seen, and this is a male-dominated profession. So you'll find it very difficult to survive. And I felt a bit apprehensive, of course, but I went, and in my initial stages, because I was in a subordinate role, I had my all-male seniors, of course, who would give me the directions, So I felt quite comfortable because I was a very submissive, obedient kind of a person, So my seniors would tell me to do a certain thing and I would do it very obediently, and they would pat me in the back and say, oh, good girl, and I would be very happy. That's all I wanted, just to be happy and please my bosses,
right.
That's in the right way, of course, but that's what I wanted and I was happy with it. But 1988, I had an opportunity to go to Netherlands for a postgraduate diploma on news and current affairs production. And that was entirely a different culture for me. In fact, I feel I must have been around 25. In fact, I feel that that's where I discovered my identity of who I was and my voice itself, because they taught me that I could have a different opinion than senior male men. Right. And I could still be respected.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So that's how I discovered my voice. My analytical opinions mattered, you know, and it could be completely different from what they were thinking. So I always say that's where I discovered myself. And I always felt that, oh my God, I came from a liberal family who believed in education, born in Kathmandu, you know. And at that point, I felt that, oh my God, there must be, I mean, for me, who had the opportunities of good education and everything, found out my real identity and my voice at the age of 25, then I could imagine the numerous millions of women who never even found their voice, never even realized their potential and just died. And that's a loss for not just the family, it's for the country itself, for the world entirely, Absolutely. You know. And that struck me as, so I felt that when I go back, you know, I'm a very serious person, you know, if I put my mind into something, I give 100%, no matter how small it is. So I had given my 100% in this course of mine. So I said, when I go back, I'm going to change so many things. I'm going to give 100% to the work that I do. And I did come back. But of course, things were not the same. I was very liked by everyone earlier when I followed the rules, you know, followed the commands that were given very obediently. But when I came back from Netherlands, I had an opinion of myself. I had a voice. So I would suggest things to be done differently because that's what I had learned, you know. And that's when the conflict started, because I think you are perceived more as a very passive person who will follow the orders, but not as someone who are going to give you, who are going to contradict your opinion, right. Or provide a contrary opinion. You know, no one was, I mean, as a female, now my gender comes in over here, perhaps no one had perceived me in that sense, you know. So that is the reason I faced a lot of struggle during that time in my career. So much so, I felt so harassed that I was a full-timer in Nepal television. I felt so harassed and I felt my potential and my growth was not taking place in the right direction. And I actually resigned from my permanent position. But television requested me sincerely to continue my job as a news desk editor and anchor. So I was the longest serving news anchor in Nepal television in the English desk. But then leaving television provided me a lot of, you know, other avenues, to explore other avenues where I could pursue my dreams of equality, gender equality, the value of a girl child, you know, which I did.
Great. But tell me this, so this entire, let's call it this entire upheaval at Nepal television, was it because you thought you were too ahead of your times, or you had just come from outside and, you know, you'd got these fresh new ideas, which maybe we as a nation were not willing to accept at that point, or was it because of your gender? Had you been a man, maybe things would have been different for you.
No, I think it was my gender predominantly.
It was your gender.
It was predominantly my gender. It was nothing to do with because as I said, before I went to Netherlands, I was in a subordinate role, taking orders, pleasing everyone, you know, doing my best. But after I came back, it was more opinion making, you know, decisive role, you know, trying to contradict others, which are normally male, of course, their roles. And I mean, the kind of harassment I felt was, you know, like the other thing that you feel is the glass ceiling is there, of course. But the other thing is, as a woman, you do not have opportunities for those informal interaction with your bosses, right, where all the promotions take place,
right?
You know,
the coffee talks, right?
You know, so because as it is, I was a mother of two child already, and the minute I finished my work, I needed to tend to my children. As you said, you feel so guilty, and that guilt really pricked me. So I would rush back home, you know, and here the male would dilly-dally in the mornings. They would go to the boss's house, talk about all what's happening inside the room. And here is Bandana, who comes from Netherlands, and she's trying to act too smart now, you know, like giving. So, and then perhaps the decisions of where you work, what promotions you take, the opportunities takes place not in a formal way, but in those informal gatherings.
It is the cigarette breaks and the coffee breaks,
right? So that's why I say it was more on a gender dimension.
But tell me one thing, at this point when you were going through all these upheavals, how did you feel? Did you realize at that point that it was the gender, or did you feel that maybe you were not working hard enough, striving hard enough, being strong enough, being more out there, putting your voice out there more strongly?
I could have said that I was not strong enough before I went to Netherlands. But when I came back from Netherlands, I believed in myself.
Right.
I knew my potential.
Right.
I had proven myself internationally.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And I had a voice.
Right.
I knew I could do a lot.
Right.
You know? And for the betterment of everyone, not just, I wasn't just looking at my personal betterment.
Of course.
You know? For the institution as well. So I was very confident. I was very confident. But it was the environment,
right.
You know, no matter how much I said, I mean, the head of the organization would not listen to me, my part of the story. He was more concerned with, you have signed a bond of 5 years. So you might as well stay for 5 years no matter what. Or you're going to pay back for it, you know, like those kinds of harassments. But I was very adamant. I was determined. I knew then, I had realized that if I continue to work in that environment, I'm going to be nowhere. I'm not going to make any headway, particularly because I had already chosen my niche
right.
about working for gender equality, for women's rights. So I knew if I had continued my job in Nepal Television as a permanent staff, perhaps I would not have been able to raise those issues through that institution the way I am able to do it independently, you know, like outside of it. But I'm happy. But having said that, I would really like to say that what I am today, I give credit to Nepal Television. Of course, like you said, you learn from your failures. You know?
And you learn from every little hurdle
Absolutely,
along the way, and you understand and
absolutely,
discover your
yes,
voice as well, I'm
yes,
sure.
Yes.
Right.
So that is why I think, you know, what I am today, I really give credit to it. It was on the job, learning, exploring myself, trying to find myself, my voice, my identity, who I am, what am I capable of, you know, and at the same time struggling about the discrimination that is so evident to me once I'm back, you know, and I'm conscious about it, and trying to mainstream women's issues into the news media, not being able to do it, you know, being called the gender wala, and, you know, like, you know,
right.
you know, and oh, you cannot talk with these women kind of things, right. You know, like there were very few who were very supportive also, but there were very few, you know, right. And they were not in the decision-making positions. So I have no regrets. Joining television. Like I said, I'm proud. I served it for 20 years and I continue to wish it all the best. Whenever I'm called for, I always give my opinion and my expertise in the growth of television, of course. But I have no regrets that I left my full-time job and I explored my potential elsewhere, and that was, you know, I did have a brief stint in the early 90s with the UN here in Nepal. But that also taught me something that, you know, I felt, of course, the pay was comparatively much, much higher than what Nepal Television paid me, which is gratifying at times. Of course. But having worked 2 years or so in, you know, with the UN, I felt, you know, I felt like a very well-paid clerk, you know, moving papers from one place to another, but actually not seeing what you have written taking place at the field, not touching the lives of people. That's what it is, you know. I think it's very important to touch people's lives, to make a difference. So I think I was built that way. Right. So I co-founded 2 organizations. One is Sathi, which works on violence against women in 1992. And the other we co-founded was Sancharika Samwa, which is a women's media forum in 1996. So I found alternate ways right. to pursue my career, my passion, my dream, my compassion for equality, which I continue to do nationally and internationally, and also at the community level even today.
Right. So again, coming back, whatever happened at NTB, Nepal Television, whatever happened at Nepal Television, if that hadn't happened in your life, do you think you would have moved on to the UN and to bigger things, or maybe different things? Do you think you would have done
maybe
that?
Not, but it would have happened at some time or the other at a certain point.
Maybe
but
later.
Let's say if it had not happened, I still say, if I had not been challenged, right. You know, if I had not been challenged saying you have signed a bond of 5 years and you need to be here, you know, no right. matter what, you know, perhaps if situation had been conducive for me, perhaps I would still have been, because I'm a very loyal person, right. I would still have been television. Maybe I would have done well, you know, maybe I would have been in a decision-making position, right. You know, right. a director of some certain section or right. so, you know. Right. But, and perhaps that would have helped me and helped television, but perhaps I would not have been able to reach out to the numerous women and touch their lives as I have done by opting to be out of television because I have founded women's shelters, I have advocated for legislative changes, particularly the domestic violence law. I have advocated, I have taken local level experiences to the global level to influence global policies and brought back those global policies to advocate and create pressure with the government to change policies. So perhaps this is a bigger role.
Right, of course.
That would have a long-term impact.
Impact and meaningful as well. Now, every time you faced a setback or a struggle, now this is going to be really crucial. How did you manage to mentally work your way out of it? For example, everyone has a different coping mechanism, but what was your mechanism, not just to cope, but to come back stronger every single time?
Ah, that's a good question. If you talk about the present time, I'm a very spiritual person. I've grown to be, not that I was like that, but I think the different struggles that I have dealt with, and not only struggles, the different stories that I've heard of women, whether it's be rape victims, physically battered women, dowry related issues, acid victims, and the helplessness I have felt at times, not being able to provide them the kind of justice that they require at the time that they most need it, has actually compelled me to, how do I find my coping mechanism? And that's where I have discovered my spirituality. I really believe in thinking positive, acting positive, listening to good things, speaking good things, emanating love and warmth and compassion in whatever you do, giving 100% no matter how small the act is in whatever you do. But I start my day with some meditation and determine I even actually post a positive post every morning. And not just to share with everyone, of course that's one of the purpose, but my main purpose is once I share it publicly, I feel that I have to act it.
Right.
So it's a workshop for me.
Right.
Throughout the day, I try to test myself. Did I really pass that test of what I had written? So I think that's a great coping mechanism for me. It's been 6 years now since I've started doing it. I haven't failed to find and it's not like I copy and paste. Of course, I listen to a lot of spiritual leaders,
right.
So that influences me, of course. But it's what I feel that day that
right.
I write, So that's my coping mechanism. And I think trying to find your original pure self, and trying to drive away the negativity that, of course, evidently does come in your mind from time to time, but just being conscious
right.
and trying to drive that away. And that's really helped me. The past 6 years, I felt I've been able to concentrate in my work more deeply. I've been able to give back much more strongly. And I think it's the thoughts, the control of my mind, I think, that's my coping mechanism.
I really love how interestingly you mentioned the thoughts and the control of your mind, because ultimately the work you're doing, it requires a lot of mental strength. Apart from you and apart from what you do on yourself and the work you do on yourself, is there somebody else who's giving you this mental strength and who's there, rock solid, just to be there, just to tell you that, what, doesn't matter, what we see you doing is difficult, but we are with you. Who's there to be your rock solid support?
I live with my mother and my mother-in-law together. It's a unique family,
Wow.
Like I have my mother also living with me, and I think I feel very blessed because I feel the blessings of elders is extremely important. I believe in that destiny, so that's one of my blessings, I should say. Whether they really follow my career or not is regardless of that, but I feel their hands are always there blessing
right.
me, so that's very important. I can't think of one solid person who's giving me that, but I think the solid thing is my experiences. As I said, the numerous people, particularly people who have faced violence, discrimination, trauma, extreme kind of trauma, and the stories that I hear from them and how they transform that pain into strength. I have seen that, I'm really talking about extreme pain, which you and I may not have
experienced. Exactly.
But they have transformed that pain into strength and they move ahead. They have hopes, of a beautiful life. That really gives me the strength to actually move ahead. I have 2 daughters, as I told you earlier, and they are my strongest critics. They will say we cannot do like Ma, like we cannot do that meditation and yoga and all that, and the way even in the night she's online and we have our time and all that. But they always admire and say, people tell them you should be like a mother, and they say, are you ready to do like my mother? You know what she does.
Exactly. People can see, this is strange for me. People can see the tip of the iceberg. They just don't know what goes into being like that.
So
and
they
I'm
say
glad
that. Yeah.
Your daughter's
very easy for you to say.
Absolutely.
Do you want to be like Bandana Rana? Okay. Do you know what she does?
Exactly.
That's what my daughters say.
Absolutely.
So I think they are my strongest supporters as well as strongest critiques that help me to go forward. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's amazing to hear that because I have a young son. I'm just waiting for the time when he's going to be there to understand what it takes. And when he's going to be a support. Right now, it is about feeling this guilt about not doing enough at any point. So I'm just so glad to hear it from a woman who's been there, done that, and now who's on the other side and who's sort of getting to enjoy the fruits of having kids who are there to support her. Because for me, that means a lot. And in fact, this entire conversation with you gives me, as a mom, a lot of hope because at the age of 25, leaving behind a 7-year-old daughter, if you could decide to go to the Netherlands and to live your dream and to be that voice and to be this sense of hope for other women, I think I have some chance as well. So for me...
You absolutely do. I went through the same guilt. I had sleepless nights before I went to Netherlands.
Of course.
Because leaving 2 children behind, it was extremely difficult. But I'm so glad my daughters have grown up to be a very responsible, good human beings. That's what matters, I think,
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's reassuring. Honestly, it's comforting and reassuring to hear that because for somebody who's done so much, I do know of all your various achievements, but for me, the fact that you're sitting here today, after having done it all, seen it all, and still absolutely unapologetic about the work that you did, as well as unapologetic about the way you brought up your daughters. For me, that is the sign of strength. That is a sign of, this is what I want to grow into. I want to grow into a person who would be able to one day look back at my career, look back at my life and say, you know what? It's fine. I managed and I did it reasonably well and I'm happy about what I did.
That's so good to hear, Mannsi. I'm touching your life, okay?
Absolutely. For me, it's always, I've been following your career for a while now and every time I see you do something, I'm like, wow, cool. I mean, if you can do it, you are a front runner. And if you can do it, it just gives people like me hope. And today, I'd like to thank you for that, for just being the hope, for being somebody who we, as a generation of young girls, look up to and somebody that we truly, truly can learn so much from. Today, this conversation has been an eye-opener because I know now that for every struggle that you've gone through, you've always come out with flying colors and you've always come up with something better, something richer, something more meaningful. And I want to thank you for that. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing everything with us. And thank you so much for just being somebody that I can always look up to whenever I need inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mannsi. Talking to you have made me stronger. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Having this conversation with Bandana ma'am today basically made me realize that not all failures, not all setbacks are professional in nature. Sometimes personal failures, personal disappointments and personal setbacks too can have a huge impact on us. In fact, some of the most successful people are those that have managed to take personal disappointments or maybe even personal grief and change it, transform it into something so much more meaningful and insightful. Talking to ma'am today made me also realize the importance of answerability. How she writes one little post on her Facebook wall every day, which holds her answerable and accountable to all the people that she's written out to and to all the people that she's reached with her words. It was also extremely nice for me to hear the importance of the right mindset, the importance of your mind in actually determining how you deal with setbacks and failures. But more than anything, this conversation gave me, a young mom, an entire hope that no matter what, one day I will be able to look back on my life, on my decisions, and do so with a smile, knowing fully well that I have lived in the best possible way that I could. I would like to personally thank Bandana ma'am for not only being an inspiration, but for also being a vocal inspiration, somebody that I know I can learn from every single time. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and I hope to see you with another guest and many more conversations next week.